how to grid a picture to draw. That's what we're going to look at in this video, and several reasons why I believe it's much better than tracing. Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Michelle, and on this channel we do all things watercolor as well as drawing, mixed media, even a little bit of business and motivation for artists too. Please do consider subscribing. If you click that little bell icon, you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make at least one free video a week here on YouTube on a Thursday with extra content for Patreon subscribers. Now, if you watch me regularly on this channel, you'll know that I'm a huge advocate for drawing. I don't provide with my tutorials things that you can trace. I don't suggest that people particularly often trace. I don't shame anybody for doing it. You know, we all do what we need to do to get our art produced, but I do encourage people to draw by hand and by eye as much as possible, and I stand by that. In fact, I've just finished making a hugely comprehensive complete drawing course. Do have a look in the video description if you're interested in that. However, there are some occasions where it's an idea to have maybe a little bit of help, and that would be, for me, that's when you're drawing something specific. So in other words, you're not just drawing a dog, a person, a house, you're drawing a specific dog, person or house that somebody perhaps has asked you to draw, perhaps a commission or something like that. Now do be careful if you're an amateur artist, because I see too many of them taking commissions before they're completely ready to do so, and even having a fully traced drawing of somebody's head will not get you out of every bit of trouble that you're going to come across when you're portrait painting. Nevertheless, as I said, if you do need that specific accuracy, it can be a good idea to give yourself a bit of a hand and speed yourself up a little bit by using some kind of scaling method. Now, what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to give you 4 reasons why I believe using the grid system is much better than tracing. Then we're going to split the video into 2 parts, where firstly I'm going to show you how to make the grid and talk about sizing, and lastly I'll show you how to use the grid to accurately get the proportions of the thing you're drawing onto your paper. Now, reason number 1 why gridding is better than tracing is because you can easily enlarge the picture. Now, when you use tracing paper, of course you can still enlarge, but what you would have to do is you would have to get your image on a computer or something like that and scale it up and then print it out larger. That can be a little bit tricky, and you know, some graphics programs, it can be a little bit difficult to ensure that you're getting the picture the right size that you want it, and then you've still got to go through the painstaking trouble of tracing it. With the gridding system, you can easily enlarge your work. Now, the second reason that using a grid is better than tracing is because you are still technically drawing. So you're not just mindlessly following a line on your paper, you're still going through the whole drawing process, and you're still going to get the satisfaction of knowing that you have drawn something by hand. The third reason that gridding is better than tracing is because you are going to get a result that looks less artificial, because you're still drawing by hand, because you're still having to join the dots, as it were. You're just getting some little pinpoints where you can make sure that you're getting things to scale. Because you're still drawing by hand, you're going to get much more of a naturalistic looking effect, and if you go on to paint on top of your drawing, you're going to get much more of a painterly effect. It's not going to look traced, basically. It's going to look like you drew it by hand, as it should. Now, the fourth reason I prefer you to grid rather than trace is because, as I said, you are still drawing by hand. You're still going to improve your drawing skills. It's not really as simple as just following a line along a piece of paper. You still have to look, and you still have to think about distance and proportion, and you still have to get those lines hand drawn, which means that not only will you be getting a more accurate result, but you will actually physically be getting better at drawing, because you're still having to think and you're still having to draw. If you never draw, you will never get better at drawing. The grid system allows you to have a little bit of guidance while still allowing you to improve your drawing skills. So let's get on now and look at, first of all, how to make a grid that you can use over the top of your photograph. I'm going to give you a real life example. We're going to be doing a portrait. We're just doing the drawing in this video. We're not going to be painting or anything like that because it would take too long. So we're just going to be doing the outline, just using the grid. But you can use this system to then take it into any medium that you would like, including just a full drawing. And I'm going to talk first about how to decide what shape and what size your squares should be, and what kind of materials you can use to make your sheet of gridding that you put over the top of your photograph. So I've got this lovely photograph here of a lady, looks Russian or something like that, doesn't she? Lots of snow on her. and I just thought it was a really interesting face, so I got this from a copyright-free website where you can get copyright-free photographs. I'll leave a link to that in the description if you need that. And we're going to transfer this onto some drawing paper. So what I've got here is a piece of tracing paper. Now, if you think you're going to do this very regularly, then it might be worth having some acetate, some clear acetate, and using something like a permanent liner pen so that you've got something with a grid on, or even several sizes of grid that you can scale up from. That will save you some time. I believe there are also, somebody said to me there are phone apps. I'm not a big fan of drawing off of a tiny phone screen, but you know, as you wish. And you can also, I believe, get some plastic sheeting that's already got grid lines on. I'm just going to use tracing paper. Now, if you see me drawing and the lines are, you know, sloping at an angle like this, be aware that it's just the angle of the camera. Everything that I draw will be at right angles. Now, it's not as easy, you know, those of you that are about to write in the comments, well, just face your camera directly down above you, but it's not actually that easy, because if I do that, then I'm likely to lean in front of the camera while I'm working. So there are no easy answers here, and I don't have a ton of equipment and money at my disposal, so we're just doing our best here. Now we're going to draw squares on this piece of tracing paper, and it doesn't really matter what size squares you draw, but what you want to make sure is that you're drawing squares and not oblongs. So whatever one side is, all the sides must be that. I quite like a 2 centimetre square, that's quite good. I could go bigger here and do a 3 centimetre square. So 2.5 centimetres, if you're in America and you're not used to using centimetres, would be 1 inch. So you could use 1/2 inch, 1 inch, 1.5 inches, whatever you like. And then if you draw these squares the same size on your piece of drawing paper, then you're going to end up with transferring the drawing across the same size. And if you go bigger, of course, you are going to transfer bigger. But as I said, make sure that whatever you use on the little one, they must be square, and then on the bigger one, they must be square as well. So as long as they're square, it'll scale up correctly. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start drawing. It's a good idea to have a set square like this. If you don't have a set square, then do just periodically use something like a piece of printer paper to check that you're actually keeping your lines square. If you just use a ruler, you may find you go a little bit at a slant. So I'm just going to make some marks across here. I think actually for this one, I think I'm going to go for 2.5 centimetres on this, and I'm going to make some marks across, and of course we can draw our line as well. And you want to sort of end up on an actual square. You don't want to go to half a square or anything like that. Just seeing, went a little bit wrong there. There we go. Couldn't understand why I was halfway along the centimetre and I'd gone wrong. So I'm going to go like that. And then I'm going to draw down here. Now you want to make sure that your grid is big enough to cover the whole of the picture that you're doing. And you're going to go down, as I said, at a right angle like this. And I mean, you could do right angles down, 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 but I actually find it better to do the whole outside of the square first, because then if anything's not quite in alignment, it's going to show up at that point. So I'm going to do my square all the way around, and then I'm going to make my marks down the side as well, and then we'll just draw across with our ruler. At this point in the video, can I ask you, as I always do, please, could you click that like button, that thumbs up? YouTube rewards videos with audience interaction, so if you like, share, subscribe, or even leave me a nice comment, remember, a nice comment, not a nasty comment, YouTube will push this video out to more people, which helps my channel to grow, meaning I can make more videos for you. So we have a real life example here, because I'm not going to pretend to do anything perfectly on the internet that I'm not doing in real life. We have a real life example here of how drawing the outside box, it's best to do it first, because look what happened here. When I drew my line across the bottom with my set square, I marked across in 2.5 centimetre increments, and I found that I was 0.5 centimetre out here. So that shows me that something's gone wrong somewhere, and what has gone wrong is this bit up here. Look at this, because I made that extra mark, I ended up in the wrong place. So I'm going to go here, 2.5, 2.5, and I should have been here. So the line should have come down here. Let's square this up, and then I can adjust the ones at the bottom so they're all a little bit too far over. So what I should have done is come here, 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 and of course I'll get an eraser in a moment and just sort these out so that I'm not getting myself in a huge muddle, and then we are more like it. We're in the right place here. So I'm going to get an eraser, sort out those marks. I'm going to make my increments down the side here as well, and then we'll join them up. So what do you know, not only had I done the side wrong, I'd done the base wrong as well. There's a reason this channel is called In the Studio with Michelle Webber, not Maths with Michelle Webber, because I'm frankly awful at it. However, we're getting there. Now, I've erased the lines that were wrong. They don't erase completely on tracing paper. That doesn't matter. You know, we're not going for neatness here. This isn't our finished drawing. All we want to make sure is that we have a usable grid and that the mistakes aren't so noticeable that we could end up looking at the wrong line. So if you do make a mistake like me, and when I'm measuring stuff, it's pretty much a given that I will make mistakes. I actually make clothes in my spare time, such as it is. You wouldn't believe it, would you? And they don't usually end up with 3 sleeves or anything like that. So we get there in the end. We get there in the end. So all you can do now is just join everything up like this. And here as well. But like I said, by going around the outside first, rather than starting to take the lines straight down, you're going to make sure that the whole grid ends up square, which is really important. And you're going to end up making sure that you haven't gone out of alignment, because you'll spot that straight away if you end up with a different number of increments, or if you end up, as I did, with not getting to the end of a line and things just looking a little bit wrong. So I'm going to get on now and draw all of these boxes on this piece of paper. So I've drawn my grid. Now I would go a little bit bigger than this if I were doing this as an actual painting, not just a YouTube demonstration. So I'm going to set it about here. But if you wanted to do this whole picture, obviously you'd want to take the grid across the whole painting area. So that's something to consider. Now what I want to do now is I want to actually stick this. That's very important. Now, because I've got so much at the top here, what I'm going to do is actually trim this along here. So I'm going to trim to the top of my grid there. And I'm going to get a piece of tape. Now, if you've got a photograph and you don't want to mess it up, then you're best either to use Scotchgard tape or to use masking tape that's had a little bit of the sticky taken out of it. You want to avoid sellotape, you know, even if it's just a photograph you've printed on cheap printer paper and you're not bothered if it tears. You're going to find that if you stick the grid down wrong and you need to move it and adjust it, you're just not going to be able to. So I'm going to cut this and then I'll be taping it to the top of my picture. I'm only going to tape it to the top, and the reason is that because there's a little bit of opacity to this film, if I need to look underneath, I'll want to lift up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to hinge it at the top so we can lift up like this. You could equally hinge it, you know, if you're right-handed, you could hinge it on this side so that you can lift up like this. Doesn't really matter, but hinge it at the top or to one side. So I've taped the top across with some Scotch tape and I'm all ready to go, and I can lift this up whenever I need to look underneath and see a bit more clearly. Of course, there is another way of doing this. You could just print your photograph onto some really cheap printed paper and draw your grid directly on if you considered that that photograph was disposable. So now I've shown you how to make your grid. Let's show you how to choose the second grid that you draw actually on your paper, how to choose the sizing of that. And let me show you how to use the grid to transfer your image onto your paper. So I've got my piece of paper now. Let me show you how I'm going to scale this up and how I know what size to do the squares here. So if I count my squares across the top here, I've got 7 squares, and of course I could also check the squares going down, but this is actually a very long piece of paper in terms of its vertical length, so I'm not going to worry about that. So I want to go 7 squares across, and each of these squares is 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch. So what I've done is I've measured my paper here, and the width of the paper, I mean, it's probably about 30 centimeters, but certainly I could go from here to here and get 28 centimeters in easily. So what I do is I get the width of my paper. Again, it doesn't matter, you know, what you're working in, but it is easier to work in centimeters simply because they're in increments of 10, but I do understand if you're not used to doing that. So my width here is 28 centimeters, so we're going to divide that by the 7 squares we've got here, because we need 7 squares across the top here. And what I have ended up with then is 4 centimeters. So a width of 28 centimeters divided by 7 squares gives me 4 centimeters. Now in this case it's exact. If you end up with some kind of decimal point situation, just round it down so that you make sure that you get that amount of squares on your paper with a little bit of excess at the side. So what I'm going to do again here, take this out of the way, is I'm going to just get a square edge on one side, and I'm going to go across like this, and then I'm going to start in a tiny bit here because I know I've got some excess at the sides, and I'm going to mark 4 centimeter squares, and I need to end up with 7. Now what I want you to think about here is that I'm drawing this quite firmly so that you can see on camera. It's important that when you do your scaling up like this, unless you're going on to something like a canvas that you're going to cover in, opaque acrylic paint. I'm just moving that one there because my centimeters have worn off of the edge there. It's so odd. So unless you're doing something where you're going to have an opaque medium that's going to cover up your squares completely, you need to keep them as light and as faint as possible. And more importantly, you need to not press hard, because it's pressing hard and denting paper that stops you being able to erase. And that is particularly the case if you're working on watercolor paper. This is cartridge paper. And again, I'm just going to draw, first of all, I'm going to draw a square edge down here. And I'm going to check how many squares I need here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have 8 going down the side. And again, I'm going to mark in 4 centimeter increments. And I'll do this all the way around the outside of the square, as I explained before. And if I go wrong somewhere, it will be easy at that point to spot it. Now, by some miracle, I have managed to actually draw my outside shape. You can't see all of it on camera at the moment, but I've been able to draw my outside shape and mark 4 centimeter gaps without major mishap. I've actually got some very large rulers here in the studio that I use both for artwork and for sewing. So it's easy for me to find a large ruler here. But if you're in an area like this and you find your ruler, isn't physically long enough to go all the way, then just draw a line sort of halfway here, for example, and then you can just take your lines down there. And that way, you don't want to be getting a ruler and taking it halfway down and then sort of moving it down to do the rest. Make sure you work in square areas so that everything stays square. It's not enough just to mark your 4 centimeter gaps. The whole thing needs to stay square. Otherwise, it's not going to give a proper copy of what you're moving across. So what I'm going to do now is join all of these little dots up and make my grid on my paper. As I said, at this point, you yourself, when you're working on your paper, you must make sure you draw very, very lightly indeed, particularly if you are working on paper. If you're working on something like canvas and you're going to be doing oil painting or something like that, you can be a bit more heavy-handed. So here's my grid finished. As I said, yours will be much lighter and fainter than this, but I need you to be able to see what I'm doing on camera. What we're going to do now is start looking at the squares. So I've got the top right-hand square here, and you can see that there's actually nothing in it. I mean, if you were painting, there would be some colour in it, but in terms of an outside line drawing, there's nothing in it. So we're going to leave this square empty, and then we're going to work across. So let's look at the next one. Now, I'll trace it on here just so you can see it, but we start in here and we come out here. The photograph's quite light here, which is why you might need to lift up at some point. So we're going on that second square down now. So I'm looking here, and if I look at the point where the hat comes in here, it's above halfway. So if we look at this line here, it's above halfway, so it's kind of about here. And then it exits, I would say, just before the halfway point of this line here. So we're looking at something like this. I'm just going to start sketching in lightly. Again, I will go slightly darker than you will need to go, just so that you can see on camera. And then this line continues up, and it just really sort of skims the edge of this square here. And let's see where it comes. So we're on the second square along here, and it seems to come out a bit like this. So we're starting to get the edge of that hat, and we're now on the third square along. It's worth sometimes just counting and checking, and the hat there, the top of the hat, comes out quite near the top. So we're going to take this line up and sketch across like this. So you're still having to do some work here. It's not just mindlessly following a line. Now when we look at the next square here, you can see the hat kind of comes out quite close to the top over here, and it curves up and then down slightly. So we'll go quite close to the top, we'll curve up and then down slightly, and you'll see how you're ending up having to sort of smooth that line out as you go across. The next line here, the next square here, is coming in and then going down just slightly below halfway. So let's do that. And you can see sometimes you get sort of, there's a little dip here, it's not quite right, so we're just going to smooth that out so that we get an idea of it. It's still going to be a lot more accurate probably than drawing by eye. And as I said, I do suggest that you always draw by eye. If it's not imperative that this is a portrait, if you just wanted to draw the lady, it would be really great practice just to draw it by eye and see how you got on with that, because that is going to help to increase your drawing skills. Just got a tiny bit in this square here, and then this one here is quite faint, you can see, but it just comes down like this. So again, I'm on the third square down now. I'm going to come down like this. So we've started to get the outline of the shape of the lady's hat. I'm going to do a bit more to the hat, and then I'll bring you back in as I do the face. So at this point you can see I've drawn the shape of the hat. I've also got that sort of rim that's going around there. Now, doing this method, won't solve all of your problems. You can see there are some what they call lost edges here, which is almost where you can barely see the difference between the shadow on the lady's face and the edge of the hat. Now, when I lift up, I've got a bit more inclination of where that is, so you can lift up if you want and just double check these things. I'm also now going to start doing the outside of the shape of the face and the features themselves. Although there'll just be a simple video cut here and you won't notice any different, I'm actually about to pop off to the dentist to see the dental hygienist. I will be back in about an hour and a half. So you may notice that the video lighting changes somewhat at this stage, but it's very hard to get a dental appointment in these COVID times. So you'll just have to bear with me. I'll be back in a mere millisecond and we'll continue on with doing the lady's face. So I'm back from the dentist, so apologies if the light has changed a bit now, just getting my teeth cleaned. I find as I get older I take more care of my teeth, and if you are single over 50, I do suggest you choose your men like you choose your horses. Have a look at the teeth. It's quite important. You can't guarantee they'll have hair anymore, but I think it's good to check the teeth. Right, so back to our drawing. Now, the reason I don't suggest that you go just from one side to the other like this, because it's really easy to get lost in it and to find that you've just transferred the wrong square across. I've seen people in my art classes do this, and they've got something that's looked rather distorted, and they don't know why. It's just because they thought they were looking at a different square. So by doing the outline like this, it works a lot better. So I've got this outline here, and what you can do is you can check. You can think, well, if the last place I can see the hat is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares down, does that line up with this? It's really important to just do those checks now and again so you don't go offline. Now, what I want to do here is I want to do the outside shape. Now, the outside shape of this lady's face here, on the bottom at least, it's cut off by the edge of this sort of fur stole. I wonder if that's a real creature. Could be, couldn't it? It looks quite real. A stoat or something, perhaps. Ooh, bit creepy. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bit where the hat kind of peaks here, and I'm going to count down how many squares I can see the lady's skin in. So after that square there, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here we are down to the bottom of the chin. So I'm going to go here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this one here is where we're going to place the chin in. So you see that by sort of double checking and doing a bit of counting, we can make sure that we're not going too badly wrong. Again, I'm always looking at the edges of each square and seeing where things go out. If something goes out of one side, ask yourself, is it closer to the top or close to the bottom of the next square to it? And in that way, you'll get a really accurate sort of effect here. So I'm going around here and we're coming up here, and I know I've got this in the right amount of squares now because it's joined up nicely with the things that I was drawing first, which is the edge of the hat. And this is a much better way of working than, as I said, just going one side to the other. So look at those main areas, and obviously it can be adjusted if you get it wrong, but it's just so much quicker to spot the mistake as soon as you make it, rather than you know, have to do a whole load of redrawing. And again, I'm going to take this down here. We've got something like this going on. So now I can go ahead and put the features in. So let's start with the mouth. And the way I like to work is just to think of it as an ordinary drawing. You know, if the squares weren't there, how would I start the mouth? I'd start by finding the center line. So it's going to be much easier, especially with this lady. She's elderly, and she's got these nice little pink lips, nice little bit of pink lipstick there, but they're quite small. It's quite easy to see the shape here. And we've got these amazing downturned lines here. These, what do they call them? Marionette lines, don't they? I think I'm getting those. Right, so we're going to find where the center of the mouth starts. And again, it's in this middle section that we just went down to the chin, and it's the second one up. So we're going here. And we can have a look, and I can sort of try and see roughly where the mouth goes out. One side kind of curves up slightly like this, and up here. And then we have this marionette line coming down here. There we are. Let's not call it a marionette line. Let's call it a line of experience and beauty. That's the thing. Let's call it that. So let's go up and coming here and just getting the shape of the lips there. Now, because we've got a bit of opacity with this tracing paper, I'm not going to worry about getting this, you know, dead right, because we're going to later on take these lines out, which I won't show in this video, but we'll just go through and we'll go onto the stage of looking at getting the features in. And we've got the nose here, so this is quite tricky. But again, you can just tie it down to a single line, and you know, where does that enter or exit? If it comes down in a point like this, where does that point come? It's further over to the left than the right of the square a little bit. And we've got a nostril coming up here, maybe a little higher, like so. And then we've got the edge of the nose comes out of that square and just goes back in, just up here. And then we've got this side here, it's a little bit more defined because she's looking over to one side. And we've got something like this. Again, we've got those facial lines coming down. I think actually much easier to draw a lady of this age than it is to draw a young lady who's got very little lines on the face. And from here, I'm going to draw the eyes. So the eyebrows can be a great place to start. And of course, you're going to find with an older person like this, the eyes become much smaller. I mean, physically, the eyeballs aren't smaller, but the lids here will obviously sag down. If you're a lady even over 20, you're going to know all about this process. And so we find that the top part of the lid comes down like so. It's quite indistinct here. Her eyes are quite in shadow. I can't see that much. But I don't need to be honest. All I have to do is get, you know, a rough eye of position. We're also going to find that she is less symmetrical than a younger person. So you just want to really follow what's in each square. And then once we get past this stage, we can erase these, and then you would go on to just having a look at it by eye, really. So you don't want to aim to put every single detail in. This is just really to stop you going completely wrong and completely offline, and just getting everything working roughly right. And then you have the ability to just go back and finish off by hand. This is why this is much better than tracing, because you do still have that natural drawing process going on. I'm just having a look here at this bit here. I think the nose was slightly sagged down. I'm just going to adjust that a little bit. And yeah. And I'm just going to go over some areas. This is an area here as well. I was watching a video on plastic surgery. Don't judge me, I'm not going to have plastic surgery. I was just interested. And he was saying that in older ladies, this area here, one thing they have done is they have this shortened because this area here becomes much broader. So the face changes, but I would rather see an old face like this with natural wrinkles than somebody with crazy stretched skin myself. There we are. Look at that. So we now have, and I'll put it so that you can hopefully see all of it on camera, we now have an outline shape for our elderly lady. We can carry on now. I can take this off of here like this. I will just remove it completely, and then we get our eraser and we're going to, erase everything that we don't need. This isn't the best eraser, it's just one that I had to hand. And as I said, you would keep this very faint normally, so you take these out. Now obviously as you erase lines, you're going to lose some tiny bits of your drawing, so if you do, just go back in with your pencil and pop those straight in. And once you've got those lines out and you've gone back to just the lady herself, then you go in by eye and you get that hand-drawn look. We're not looking for 110% accuracy here. We're just looking at this grid system stopping us from getting things badly out of proportion. And as I said, I suggest you always default to drawing by eye and only use this when it's really important that you get some kind of likeness, either of a person, an animal, or maybe even a house. So do let me know in the comments section if you found this video helpful. If you're wondering what all the cards are, it was my birthday at the weekend. I went to see the Van Gogh Immersive exhibition, is that what it's called, where you have all the little lights and things that go all over the walls. Absolutely fabulous. Do check that out if you ever get a chance to. And before you leave this video, don't forget to click the down arrow and expand the video description. I've got lots of free stuff in there for you. I've got free downloadable PDFs, even a free course you can take. As I mentioned at the start of this video, I've just completed making a really comprehensive drawing course. You can watch 10 tips from that course now for absolutely no money whatsoever in this video here.